Inside the Hell, the secret mission of Witold Pilecki. I still remember the smell of the smoke. An old man's voice trembles as he speaks. It wasn't the smell of wood or coal. It was something heavier, darker. It clung to your clothes, your skin, even your soul. Those are the words of Stanislaw Dubiel, a Polish survivor who once shared a barrack with a man no one suspected to be a spy. Captain Witold Pilecki, the man who would later be called the volunteer to Auschwitz. When World War II broke out in 1939, Poland was torn apart. The Nazi occupation brought terror, and resistance movements quickly formed underground. Among them was the Tajna Armia Polska, the secret Polish army, one of the first organized resistance groups in occupied Europe. Witold Pilecki, a farmer, soldier, and patriot, joined it early on. He was a quiet man, known for his discipline and his unwavering faith in Poland's freedom. But when reports began circulating about a mysterious new camp near the town of Oswiecim, a place from which no one returned, he proposed something unthinkable. He volunteered to be captured and sent inside. No one in the resistance had ever heard such an idea. "It's madness," one of his comrades reportedly said. "You won't come out alive." Pilecki simply replied, "Then I will die knowing what the world must know." In September 1940, he allowed himself to be arrested during a German roundup in Warsaw. Under the false name Tomasz Serafiński, he was transported in a crowded cattle car with hundreds of others. The journey took days. Men suffocated in the stench and darkness. Some went mad before even reaching the destination. When the train finally stopped, they saw the sign, Arbeit macht frei. Work sets you free. Inside the camp, everything was stripped away. Names, dignity, hope. Prisoners became numbers, and Pilecki's number was 4859. He later wrote in his secret report, "We were no longer people. We were shadows moving under orders, surviving from one whistle to the next." For months, Pilecki endured beatings, hunger, and forced labor. But beneath the horror, he began his mission. Quietly, he started identifying other Polish prisoners, officers, priests, doctors, anyone who could help. Together, they formed an underground network known as Związek Organizacji Wojskowej, the Military Organization Union. Their goal was clear: survive, resist, and tell the world. According to later accounts, his companion Józef Cielikowski was one of the first to join the secret operation. He recalled years later, "We met in the kitchen barrack. Pilecki whispered that he was not just a prisoner, he was on a mission. I thought he had lost his mind until he started organizing medicine, food for the weak, and smuggling notes through the walls." Cielikowski himself would later be caught and executed, but before that, he helped Pilecki send the first coded messages from inside Auschwitz. The reports described the systematic extermination of Jews, Poles, and Soviet prisoners. At first, no one outside believed such horror could be real. The British and Polish governments in exile found it almost impossible to comprehend the scale of the genocide. "The world will not believe this," Pilecki wrote. "They will think it's madness until they see the ashes." Life inside Auschwitz was a cycle of cruelty. Pilecki worked in various commandos, forced labor groups, to gather intelligence. He observed how the SS expanded the camp, building new blocks and crematoria. He saw transports arrive daily, entire families disappearing into the gas chambers disguised as showers. Once, he met a young Jewish boy who had been separated from his parents. "He gave me his bread," the boy said. "He told me to eat fast." Then he was gone. That boy survived, now an old man named Leon Finkelstein, who later testified, "I didn't know he was a spy. I just thought he was the only man in Auschwitz who still had a soul." Outside the camp, few understood what was happening. German propaganda called Auschwitz a labor camp. Locals in Oswiecim heard the rumors, strange trains, the endless smoke, but speaking about it meant death. Pilecki and his underground group managed to build a crude radio transmitter using stolen parts. In 1942, they broadcasted their first message to the Polish resistance in Warsaw, a desperate warning about mass executions. The message was intercepted by British intelligence, but it was dismissed as an exaggeration. Meanwhile, the killing intensified. Entire transports of Jews from across Europe, France, the Netherlands, Hungary, began arriving in 1942-43. We watched them march to the so-called baths, Pilecki wrote. The smoke rose higher every day. The sky itself seemed to darken. But amidst the despair, there was resistance. Pilecki's network smuggled extra food to dying prisoners, sabotaged German operations, and even planned a rebellion. They collected weapons, waited for the signal that never came, the signal that the Allies or the Polish Home Army would attack the camp from the outside. It was like waiting for a miracle that never arrived, said another prisoner, Władysław Sobolewski. We were ready to fight, but no one came. By 1943, Pilecki realized he had to escape. The world needed his report, and the resistance needed to know the truth from someone who had seen it with his own eyes. He carefully planned his breakout with two comrades, Jan Redje and Edward Pilecki. On the night of April 26, 1943, during a storm, they cut through the camp's wire fence and slipped into the dark woods. For days, they hid in barns and ditches, hunted by German patrols. They finally reached a safe house in Nowy Wisnitz, weak, starving, but alive. Pilecki immediately began writing what would become known as Report Witolda, the Witold Report. It was the first comprehensive eyewitness account of Auschwitz. In it, he described everything: the gas chambers, the medical experiments, the executions, and the silent heroism of those who still tried to help one another. I wanted the world to know, he wrote, so that those who died would not vanish in smoke. But tragically, much of his warning went unheard for years. The Allies had other priorities. The war machine rolled on. The truth about Auschwitz would not fully be believed until the camps were liberated in 1945. Years later, a fragment of his final words would resurface from his post-war writings. I tried to live in such a way that my death would have meaning. If I failed, then at least I failed with honor. Witold Pilecki's mission had exposed the darkest secret of the Nazi Empire. Yet the price was immense. When he returned to Poland after the war, he was arrested by the new communist authorities, the same country he had risked his life to save. And yet, among survivors, his name never died. As Leon Finkelstein once said in an interview before his death, "If there was a light in Auschwitz, it was because of men like him. He walked into hell and walked out so we could tell the truth."
The old wooden chair creaked as the survivor adjusted himself. "When I think of him now," he said, "I see a man with quiet eyes, eyes that had seen too much, yet never stopped hoping." That man was Witold Pilecki. After his escape from Auschwitz in April 1943, Pilecki had only one purpose: to make the world believe what he had witnessed. He carried with him mental notes, hidden codes, and fragments of testimonies from those who could no longer speak. Every detail was burned into his memory: the barracks, the transports, the cries from behind the walls of the gas chambers. He reached Warsaw weak and half-starved, but determined. He didn't want rest, remembered Maria Szelongowska, a member of the Polish resistance who met him on his return. He asked for paper and ink. He said, "I must write before my memory fades. The truth must not die with me." Within weeks, Pilecki composed his detailed report, over 100 pages, describing the structure of Auschwitz, the extermination process, and the resistance he helped build. He sent copies through the underground courier network to the Polish government in exile in London. But the world was slow to listen. At that time, 1943, the Allies were focused on military operations in Italy and preparing for the invasion of France. Reports of Nazi atrocities had been circulating since 1942, but many were dismissed as exaggerated wartime propaganda. Even within intelligence circles, the horror of mass industrialized murder seemed inconceivable. The Polish emissaries who delivered Pilecki's report were met with polite disbelief. "They thought we were dramatizing," said Jan Karski, another Polish courier, who tried to warn the West. "How can you make them believe that one nation is burning another to ashes?" In London, British officials summarized Pilecki's report as unconfirmed but disturbing. It was filed among hundreds of other wartime documents. The truth would have to wait. Meanwhile, in occupied Poland, Pilecki continued to fight. Though he had survived Auschwitz, he could not escape the war. He rejoined the resistance and took part in the Warsaw Uprising of 1944, a desperate, doomed attempt by the Polish underground to free the capital before the Soviets arrived. One of his comrades later recalled, "He fought like a man who had already died once. He never took cover. He said if death came again, it would not find him hiding." After the uprising was crushed, Pilecki was captured again, this time by the Germans, and sent to a prisoner of war camp in Bavaria. When the Allies liberated it in 1945, he could have gone to safety, but his heart remained in Poland. "My country is still not free," he told friends. "How can I rest while others are still enslaved?" When Pilecki returned to his homeland, the war was over, but a new regime had taken power. Poland had fallen under Soviet influence, and the new communist government viewed former resistance members with suspicion, especially those connected to the non-communist Home Army. Witold Pilecki became a target. He began secretly gathering information about the arrests and executions carried out by the new regime, sending reports to the Polish government in exile in Italy. In his heart, he believed that truth, once again, was worth any price. One of his close friends, Tadeusz Plujanski, later wrote, "He told me that the worst part was not the camps. It was watching his own country become a prison." In May 1947, the communist secret police arrested him. They accused him of espionage and conspiring against the state. His interrogations were brutal, beaten, tortured, starved, yet he refused to betray anyone. His wife Maria was allowed one brief visit. "She smiled at me," she later said. Even then, his face was calm. He whispered, "I cannot live otherwise. They can only take my life." On May 25, 1948, after a show trial, Witold Pilecki was executed with a bullet to the back of his head in Warsaw's Mokotów prison. His body was buried secretly, somewhere among the graves of common criminals, so that his name would be erased from history. For decades, it almost was. In communist Poland, mentioning his name could mean imprisonment. His reports about Auschwitz were classified, hidden deep in government archives. Children learned about heroes of socialism, but not about the man who had volunteered for Auschwitz. And yet his story refused to die. Among survivors and exiles, his legend grew quietly, passed from one whispered conversation to another. In London and Chicago, Polish émigré newspapers printed fragments of his story. In Israel, Holocaust researchers stumbled upon references to an officer who sent messages from inside the camp. It was not until the 1990s, after the fall of communism, that Pilecki's full report resurfaced in Poland. Historians were stunned. One of them said, "Reading his words was like hearing the voice of a ghost, a man who saw hell, escaped it, and was silenced by his own country." The document, known as Raport Witoldi, provided one of the earliest and most precise descriptions of the camp's machinery of death. It confirmed beyond doubt that Pilecki had sent detailed accounts of the mass exterminations years before the Allies ever liberated Auschwitz. In 2006, the Polish government posthumously awarded him the Order of the White Eagle, the nation's highest honor. His name was finally spoken aloud in schools and memorials. Streets and monuments were renamed after him. But even recognition could not erase the haunting question, what if the world had believed him sooner? In 2013, a small ceremony was held at the site of the former Mokotów prison. Survivors, soldiers, and schoolchildren stood in silence as a priest read Pilecki's own words. "I have tried to live so that in the hour of my death I would feel joy rather than fear. I have loved Poland more than life itself." Standing beside the memorial was an elderly woman with trembling hands. It was Maria Pilecka, his daughter. She whispered, "For so many years we were told never to speak his name. Now the world finally knows who my father was." The legacy of Witold Pilecki goes far beyond Poland. Historians now regard him as one of the bravest figures of the 20th century, a man who not only faced the horrors of Auschwitz, but chose to enter them willingly. His mission embodies something timeless, the courage to confront evil even when the world refuses to see it. As the years pass, fewer remain who can recall the voice of the man who walked into hell. But his words still echo in classrooms, in museums, in the quiet reflection of those who read his report. "I wrote so that someday someone would listen. And now, at last, we do."